following video contains spoilers for all of Final Fantasy XIV up to and including patch 6.3. Viewer discretion is advised. Zenos ye Galvus is a character unlike any other in the breadth of Final Fantasy XIV. While other villains' motives can be attributed to ambition, pain, revenge, loss, suffering, malice, despair, or the belief that they alone know best, Zenos stands apart, or perhaps above all of this, by boldly stating that he has no reason, no good reason, that is, save that he does as he pleases, going as far as to mock and ridicule any who would expect or excuse any villainous act if the motive met with their approval. It is for this reason that Zenos' effect on the fanbase is so uniquely polarizing. From his adoring fans to his greatest naysayers, it can be hard to find any middle ground. Fans love his aesthetic, his unique takes on the themes of depression and anhedonia, and the superb delivery of his theatrical lines. Others criticize his lack of growth, interest, or action, and see him as a one-dimensional character with few redeeming qualities. But the purpose of this video is not to debate the merits of Zenos as a character, but rather to investigate his treatment within the context of the narrative of Endwalker, and to an extent the greater whole of Final Fantasy XIV. In this video, we will examine the stark differential treatment allotted by the writers and developers of the game when compared to other characters and villains. We will take an in-depth look at the ways in which, despite a narrative hype spanning 2 full expansions, the story of Endwalker fails to give Zenos a fulfilling conclusion, and why this may even be intentional. Some claim that Endwalker fixed Zenos' character, but in this video, we will explore 6 ways it may have just broken it. Part 1. Story Not Found. Zenos has been featured in cutscenes since Heavensward Patch 3.5, The Far Edge of Fate, which was released in 2017. Even before then, the concept for the character existed in the minds of writers Banri Oda and Natsuko Ishikawa, as well as producer Naoki Yoshida. In this 6 years' time, we know surprisingly little about the character when compared to others, even other villains. And what we do know has often been hard to find or completely absent from the main game. The most glaring example of this is The Hunt Begins, a short story only available in Chronicles of Light, a physical companion novel first published in 2019 in the lead-up to Shadowbringers. The Hunt Begins is a story about the 14-year-old Zenos, a brilliant but friendless boy who from the onset has always been alone. We also learn early on that his mother died when he was very young, though we do not learn her name. The story goes on to detail daily beatings at the hands of a sword instructor, a tutor that was gifted to him by his father, and also features a strained meeting between Zenos and Varus. By the end of the story, Zenos overcomes the would-be assassin, ending his life. The story makes clear Zenos' relationship with his father, with princehood, and with other concepts held dear to Garleans, as well as Garlemald. It also introduces the idea of a young Zenos praying for an encounter with a hero worthy of his blade, and for everything that stands to follow between him and the Warrior of Light. Yet the story, nor its plot points, were ever mentioned or featured in the game. Moreover, the book itself remained out of print and very difficult to obtain until October 2022, when a reprint was made available. The story was never published on the Lodestone. The blatant absence of this story, or of any of its contents in the core of the game, is and remains one of the main fumbles with Zenos' character by the writers. Other instances that shine the most light on Zenos as a character through his interactions with others include In the Darkness Blooms the Lily, a story published on the Lodestone's Tales from the Storm. This short story details Zenos' time in Doma, as well as his interaction with Yotsuyu, the one that led to her becoming an acting viceroy. Through this, we see Zenos' general disdain for tradition as little more than a passing curiosity, be they Garlean or otherwise, as well as his disinterest in his position, and far greater focus, bitterness and hatred that could be used for tools to deliver him his only desire, a worthy opponent. Like the above, this event is not mentioned directly in the game. This story is also the first time until the post-patch cycle of Shadowbringers that we learn the specifics of the Garlean struggle for the throne, which occurred after Solus Zos Galvus' death during Heavensward, notably the name of other members of the royal family, and specifically Varys' uncle Titus. This is not the first time vital information about the Galvus family and Zenos' upbringing would be hidden on the lodestone or otherwise. In the last set of stories, Tales from the Dawn, released in August of 2022, we finally learn the name of Zenos' previously mentioned mother, Carosa. We also learn that Zenos' paternal grandmother, Hypatia, outlived her and lived to Zenos' adult years. Additionally, we see other references to Titus, his son Nerva, and his wife Aracenia. Likewise, these characters are yet never mentioned in-game. In an interview with Michael Christopher Koji Fox in 2017, we were promised further information regarding Zenos and the Galvus royal family, as well as Zenos' relationship with his father. This too was never touched upon again. When we contrast this information with other villains, we notice just how little context for Zenos' behavior we were truly given in-game. Over time, we were not only able to hear Emmett Selk's full backstory, for example, but we were allowed to relive some of it during our time in Elpis. The same was allotted Fandaniel, with in-game revelations of a past life as Ammon, and a full playthrough of some of his time in Elpis as Hermes. The Pandemonium series, likewise, is set to provide detailed information on the pasts of Elidibus and La Habrea. It becomes understandable, therefore, why some players would mistake Zenos for one-dimensional, or why they would make other assumptions about his character. For example, that he enjoys murder or killing, or that he had a happy childhood with all of the privileges allotted a royal prince, concepts that would be countered if and only if the supplementary content were available or mentioned in-game. Part 2. Content null. Even if we look past the absence of any context given to players in-game, we cannot ignore that the Warrior of Light as a character is given significantly less. Zenos remains the only villain and one of the few characters where the Warrior of Light is given next to no understanding of the character when compared to the player. This is due to the fact that the majority of Zenos' arc across 4 expansions is told through meanwhile cutscenes first and foremost, and this is the only villain where this is the case. The Warrior of Light only has a total of 7 direct interactions with Zenos, which are detailed on the screen. Every other time Zenos appears on screen, it is during a meanwhile cutscene, where he interacts with other characters or monologues to himself for the benefit of the player. The Warrior of Light does not share this information. What this means is that the Warrior of Light is unaware of the majority of Zenos' character. Even when accounting for the story points not included in the main MSQ, the Warrior of Light knows much less about Zenos than the player. This is not the case for other villains such as Emmett Selk, Hermes, Elidibus, or La Habrea, or even smaller villains such as Fordola, Yotziu, or Ilberd. The Warrior of Light does not know the extent to which Zenos believes them to be his friend. They do not have direct knowledge of his death and rebirth, nor of his time traveling to Garlemald to put a stop to Black Rose and his father. They do not know that he dreamed of the final days, and they do not know how closely he considered Alisaie's words in the moments leading up to the final battle with the Endsinger. This is felt all the more keenly as a failing of the writers due to a readily available tool at their disposal that they could have at any time used to rectify this shortcoming, namely the Echo. The developers have made extensive use of this tool in the past to divulge details that a character may not speak of on their own, such as with Fordola in Stormblood, or in the case of the role quest with Shadowbringers and Endwalker. Despite this, the Echo has never once been used to provide much needed detail to the Warrior of Light about Zenos. These scenes, this information, was all deemed important enough for the player to know, but without that context, the Warrior of Light cannot show their trademark mercy, compassion, empathy, or understanding, something we will explore later in this video. Part 3. Terminal Failure, Unable to Open Plot Point. In addition to pertinent plot points not included in the game or mentioned elsewhere, multiple story threads surrounding Zenos were dropped entirely. In Shadowbringers patch 5.2, we learn that Zenos has also witnessed the final days of Amarat in the form of dreams that he has always had. In response, Fandaniel asks if Emmett Selk could have found a way, and comments that few have memories of the final days. In Endwalker, during the first scene where Zenos appears with Fandaniel in a quest called The Color of Joy, Zenos' dreams of the final days are again mentioned, with Fandaniel claiming that they enlightened Zenos to the truth. And that's the last we ever hear of it. Why did Zenos dream of the final days? What did Emet-Selch find a way to do with regards to Zenos? And most importantly, why did the developers and writers think that having Zenos dream of the final days was important enough to detail and show to the players, but never mention in-universe to the Warrior of Light? What was the point of it all? In a Q&A session of Live Letter number 68 in February 2022, Yoshi P explains that the reason Zenos dreamt of the final days was that it was passed along in Emet-Selch's DNA. While we have seen scant instances of souls retaining some of their own knowledge, this is the first and only time we have ever seen memories passed on in a bloodline, and it allegedly skips over Varys entirely. One can perhaps see why this answer to a question that was allowed to brew over the course of years, delivered not in the course of the story, but in a Japanese language exclusive Q&A, was less than satisfactory. These are not the only plot points or curiosities that were quietly waved away with regard to Zenos. In one of the last cutscenes of Stormblood, Elidibus calls Zenos an invaluable test subject. A test for what? And why? This is never brought up again. These odd comments involving Zenos only continue into Shadowbringers and Endwalker, where in the Sorrow of Warlet's side quest it is mentioned that the weapons project cannot sustain Zenos' combat data. Additionally, in Endwalker, Hythlodaeus refers to Zenos as a fearsome beast with no further context. Zenos is also given a new title, that of Viator, which in Latin means traveler. Though this title, given to Garlean traders and defectors, could have just as easily been given to any number of other Garlean characters, only Zenos has granted it. Given the specific meaning of the word traveler to the Warrior of Light, one is left to wonder if there was a further connection intended. Lastly, in an interview with NME in October 2022 prior to the release of Endwalker, Yoshi P teased that there was a specific reason why Zenos may have chosen the path of Reaper. Additionally, in an interview with popular Final Fantasy XIV content creator Zepla, Yoshi P further mentioned that there could be some reason Zenos became a Reaper. As of patch 6.3, despite meeting Zero and traveling to a Garlean village where Reapers are said to hail from and commune with their avatars, we have not received information that Yoshi P hinted at. These dropped plot points may have been the reason Yoshi P, in an interview with radio show Mog Station Special, stated that it was hard to deal with Zenos' role in Endwalker. If we couple this with the scrapped Garlean expansion that was originally set to occur before Endwalker, one begins to wonder if the original plan for Zenos was hastily reworked to fit into the confines of a now rushed narrative. Part 4. Invalid Data. If we instead focus only on what was presented in the totality of Endwalker's story, Zenos' arc, and most importantly, his death, make little sense when pitted up against the knowledge we have prior to 6.0, and is completely contradicted by what we learn in the post-patch cycle. During an interview with Famitsu magazine, Ishikawa claimed that Zenos' story needed no further embellishment. Yoshi P and Oda seemed incredulous that players would question the validity of Zenos' death, stating cheekily that perhaps they should have added a subtitle stating that he was, in fact, deceased. In the February 2022 live letter, when asked if Zenos would be back, Yoshi P stated, "Watch the cutscene again and see how you feel. He stopped breathing, right?" Not exactly a convincing answer, especially considering the open and closed cases he made for Heidelin and Zodiac shortly afterwards. But the reason Zenos' death is so hotly questioned is a matter of established lore. Zenos Galvus has been called an Ascian in all but name, and retains many of the same abilities, such as body swapping, resurrection, and teleportation. We watched him return from the dead post-decapitation after possessing a dragon, casting doubt on this second death. What then of Yoshi P's second argument in the Famitsu interview? He stated that it was the nature of his place of death that stopped his return, specifically that the rules of Ultima Thule would not allow it. Unfortunately, the 6.25 Omicron questline directly contradicts this statement. In the Omicron Gathering quest, the denizens of Dead Stars featured in the Final Day dungeon are brought back to life, and a proxy of the Omicrons is allowed to traverse via the Ragnarok all the way back to the source. If Ultima Thule has been changed by Median's Song of Hope, or by the power of Dynamis, or seeing how you feel, to support life, and the Ragnarok exists both in Ultima Thule and on Aetheris, and can support travel, then why for Zenos and Zenos alone, and despite his Ascian powers, would this not be the case? Part 5. Error. Not supported. Not only is Zenos' arc and death in defiance of established lore set for the character's powers, as well as the place where he met his end, the death itself defines the themes of the expansion. Endwalker was penned as the end of the Hydaelyn and Zodiark saga, a swan song of hope. Despite the implications of the narrative, it was obviously the writer's intentions to tell an uplifting story through this expansion, and through the actions of the Warriors of Light and the Scions through the MSQ of Final Fantasy XIV. However, Zenos was uniquely denied the prospect of hope promised to other characters, even those who have performed more atrocious acts, such as Fandaniel, Emmett Selk, Median, or arguably Vanilla as well. In Ultima Thule, each Scion attempts to reason with and understand the hopeless nature of its denizens. Garahatia outright tells the leader of a genocidal robotic society that it is not his place to judge the Omicrons. Yet this understanding is never extended to Zenos. Perhaps this is due to his posturing, or his philosophy of moral relativism and nihilism. But Zenos alone is still denied the fulfilling end he asked the Warrior of Light if they had found. Even his last words went unfinished. His death is also ineffectual as a cautionary tale. The cautionary tale usually provides the character with a warning. If you act in this way, you will meet a terrible fate. This was clearly painted when Alisaie confronts Zenos. The ultimatum was set. The defining moment of a common cautionary tale in the narrative is that the warning must be disregarded. With Zenos, this clearly is not the case. We, by the way of another meanwhile scene, see him contemplating Alisaie's words and coming to the aid of the Warrior of Light, assisting them in their fight with the Endsinger. After the battle, Zenos clearly tells the Warrior of Light that they would not stop them from walking away from their battle, and that it was the sole pleasure that they have to share. And yet, despite heeding Alisaie's warnings, Zenos still meets with the unpleasant fate, spitting in the face of the hope or understanding that Endwalker offers to all of its other villains. Part 6. Not accepted. During one of the most iconic scenes in Stormblood, the Warrior of Light is given the choice to accept or deny Zenos. Even if the player chooses to accept Zenos, he mocks the Warrior of Light, but the choice is nevertheless presented. This is one of the final chances the player has to act positively, or even neutrally towards Zenos. Oddly, the character is instead treated, both by the narrative of the characters in the universe and the structure of the story as a whole, differently than other villains who have caused or have participated in much worse atrocities. This is especially prevalent in the English localization. Through the course of the story, the Warrior of Light is made to physically reach out to Hades and Elpis. They are able to offer sincere apologies to Elidibus when they meet him in the Crystal Tower prior to departing for the past. In the depths of the Atelioscope, the warrior can tell Ammon that they will adventure with them in the future. Yet when Zenos, in the form of Shinryu, bursts through the Endsinger's ultimatum, the only options the game offers are negative. The warrior cannot thank them, cannot intone shock to see them, and cannot even remain silent with an ellipses as a response. Through the course of the game, understanding and compassion is offered to Hermes, Hades, and Elidibus. Redemption or mercy are offered to Gaius, Ferdola, and the Omicrons as well as Omega. After they die, they are remembered fondly or neutrally. Even Varus is reflected upon with pity after Anima is defeated in the Tower of Babel. Yet, even after Zenos is alleged to be dead and gone, the players are constantly and consistently reminded of his wrongs, with new atrocities added, in the English localization specifically, against Zero for added effect. Zenos is most often brought up after his death by Zero in her struggles to understand humanity. Each time, she states, he is dead, and that she does not wish to understand, or he is dead, and the world is better for it. This bizarre treatment of the narrative, and specifically the English localization headed by Kate, is unique to Zenos and ultimately leaves the scenes feeling disjointed and irrelevant. These inconsistencies, these dropped story threads, confused narratives, missing plot points, and contradictory statements add flames to the fires of speculation on whether or not Zenos is, in fact, dead and gone, as the developers feel compelled to state time and time again. At the very least, we are left to wonder if this is the last we'll be seeing of the character in the course of the main narrative. After all, Emmett Selk died and was in a full third of Endwalker. Due to the way the character was treated, however, opinions are split. Most Zenos fans would love to see a return of their beloved villain, to either clear up unanswered questions, or to add a much-needed anti-hero to the roster of former Scions. But others, fearful of past treatment of the character, would rather him remain sleeping peacefully in Ultima Thule, or more drastically still, would have preferred that his arc began and ended with Stormblood. We at Echoes of Aetheris sincerely hope that you enjoyed this in-depth analysis of Zenos as a character, and please check back again soon for other critical analysis of Final Fantasy XIV.